Hey, what's up? Another episode of Fourth Person Point of View, baby. Got something I wanted to share with y'all, great people. So this is not a book review, but this book right here, this is a book I've been hearing about for quite some time now, so I picked up a copy. I suggest you pick up a copy too. It's kind of neat here. So this book was written by Kwame Nkrumah. It was called Neo-colonialism, the Last Stage of Imperialism. Kwame Nkrumah was born September 21st, 1909 in Ghana. He had a teacher who attended school in the United States, and he told Kwame about it. So in 1935, Kwame came to the United States, and he didn't have a lot of money, but he was able to get a scholarship, and he attended Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, where he graduated in 1939 with a degree in economics and sociology. Kwame Nkrumah returned to Ghana and became the first prime minister in 1952. So while he was prime minister, he had a voice, something that he didn't have before, and a lot of people didn't have before him. So one of the things he wanted to see was an independent nation. He wanted Ghana to be independent, and that's what he advocated for. And fortunately, March 6, 1957, Ghana got its independence from Britain. March 6, 1960, Kwame Nkrumah introduced his new constitution. April 27, 1960, Ghana had its first presidential election, and Kwame Nkrumah became the first president of Ghana. That was cool. So it was moving according to what his plans were for his country. Then, of course, everybody doesn't agree with this. This is a new system, so he had a lot of people who did not like him. There was also speculation. There was also a lot of influence from Western civilizations like the United States, Britain, and other places. So what happened? Kwame Nkrumah was exiled to Guinea, where he was made an honorary vice president. But this book right here, Neo-colonialism and the Last Stage of Imperialism, was written in 1965. So for some of y'all who don't know what neo-colonialism means, it basically means, let me give you a Merriam-Webster's dictionary instead of my own, which it would have summed it up. But neo-colonialism, according to Merriam-Webster, is the economic and political policies by which a great power indirectly maintains or extends its influence over other areas or people. And imperialism means something similar. It means the policy, practice, or advocacy of extending the power and dominion of a nation, especially by direct territorial acquisitions or by gaining indirect control over the political or economic life of other areas. So neo-colonialism, remember America had 13 colonies that were under British control as well. So this book right here, like I was saying in the beginning, I had to buy this book. I did. I've heard so much about this guy. And this book here, if you like reading, it's online. You can get it on Amazon. I paid this. It's kind of pricey. It's very pricey. I couldn't find one cheaper, and I'm not sure. I don't know if it's printed in Africa or what. But you know, when Kwame Nkrumah wrote this book in 1965, he got a lot of backlash, and the United States, was sending $25 million in aid to Ghana. When he published this book, that aid was paused. He ruffled a lot of feathers. He did. He ruffled a lot of feathers. And if you remember, I said he was born in 1909, right? This book was published in 1965. Let me be the first to say this book right here was this was genius. For a man born in 1909 in Africa, in Ghana, to put this right here together, I can almost just understand here in 2025 how much of a threat this was. This right here exposed everything. So you know how people talk about like now how everybody goes into Africa and exploit African resources, but Africa doesn't have anything. We're talking now. This book here, published in 1965, kind of went in and talked about how they were doing it. And the funny part about it, I just finished this book. I just finished this book like 2 days ago. Some of the companies that go into Africa, they're in the United States. Like now, which was cool. Some of them are like in Utah, Texas, New Jersey, Philadelphia. So when you hear about like people going to Africa, taking their bauxite and sulfur and quartz and stuff, you think of this like imaginary, mythical group of people that's like wearing like safari hats. They in the United States. And the cool thing about it, the banking systems, Bank of America, all of them had their hands in it. Like seriously, they had their hands involved in it too. So you had banks over here in America going over there financing certain types of operations, financing their friends. They were giving loans to certain countries, in certain African countries, who felt like, hey, if you're over here in my country, give us money. So some of these Western companies, like in America and Britain, or Italy, Venezuela, a lot of people had their hands in the cookie jar. But so they would give some of these African nations loans, right? And the loans would have such high interest rates that it was almost impossible. Like one quote in the book talks about if certain African nations are going to pay back that loan, the GDP would have to grow 5 times that amount for 200 years. So Kwame Nkrumah in 1965 was able to stop where he was and look out across Africa as a whole continent and see all the corruption and people who had their hands in Africa. On the flip side, something that's kind of neat here, some of the contracts, that they had with the African chiefs, guess when they expired? So this is 1965. He talked about in the book how some of the contracts were started in 1940. Some of the contracts just expired in 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012. That's how long they had the mineral rights. And when I say 2010, 2011, I'm talking about countries in the United States of America. Yeah, like over here. This is the kicker though. In 1964, guess how much some of the profits that the Western companies were making? They were making like equivalent to $1 billion today. So what $1 billion is today in 2025, they was making the equivalent in 1940, 1950, 1960. On the flip side, they making all this money off Africa. Then they go back and give African countries a loan with a high interest that they couldn't pay. So like when people talk about, hey man, everybody exploits Africa's resources. Yeah, they do. But what he did in this book right here, he went in and told you who, like the ICI, International Chemical, ICI is International Chemical, I think the other I stands for Incorporation. You got the Rockefeller and Patino. You got the American Aluminum Company. You got the Dutch Bank. You have, man, there's so many. You got so many banks that were formed. And then he talked about this guy here named Mr. P.J. Oppenheimer. He was from South Africa. and he was one of the main people over this whole operation when it comes to Africa's resources. So he was like one of the forefathers who had his hands in everything. Wealthy, like making big money. Everything from their diamonds. So they had all these diamond mines. I'm trying to find some of these companies here. So many. I'm gonna give you a few. So you had DuPont. You ever heard of DuPont? You ever heard of Firestone? So Firestone used to get rubber from certain places in Africa. You had IG Farben, DuPont, the ICI, which that ICI is like International Chemical Incorporated, I think. You have Diamond Purchasing and Trading Company. You got De Beers Consolidated. Consolidated Company, Bull Fountain Mines Ltd. You have man, you got so many in here. Like Selection Trust, you got Bay Hall, you got the Anglo-American Sphere, you got British South Africa Company, you got Central Mining and Investment. When I tell you like it's so many, like I'm not BSing, you got so many companies that were formed to go over there. They had so many minerals and resources that people would go over there and get like a lease. And what happened was some of the African chiefs didn't understand the English language or the language like from another country. They would go over there and meet them, right, and tell them what they wanted to do. The African chief didn't have any, they understood, but they didn't understand the black and white. So what would happen, the African chiefs would like give their thumbprint or something, or their word, they put an X, they have the Western attorney to witness it, and then the African chiefs say something like, yeah, such and such promised me such and such, but he hasn't came back yet. And so the African chief would get mad after the promise had been kept, and he would say something along the lines like, hey, I want them out of here. Then the Western nations would come back and say, well, Chief such and such, you put your thumbprint or fingerprint or your X on here signing this contract. The chief looking stupid. Then somebody translate to the chief what he did. So the chief had given all these people like access to 33,000 acres of land, 70,000 acres of land for 30, 40 years. I'm like, man, they had coal, copper, chrome, nickel. You had bauxite, you got rutile, you got lead, zinc. Another company is Neo-colonialism Canadian Exploration. Consolidated Gold Fields. Man, you got all these companies. Yeah, you got all these different companies. I'm talking, man, it's like hundreds. I'm talking hundreds of companies, and some of them are written. Some of them are from other countries too. But you'd be surprised how many in the United States. Like I looked up some online. I looked up some of them online, and they still exist today. Like one in New Jersey. And if you think about a person living in the United States that got ties to Africa's resources, man, these people are making like billions of dollars. Then it makes more sense to me now. So, you know, when there's a presidential election and somebody say the such and such party raised $150 million, and you asking yourself, where the hell are they getting all this damn money from? This is where, like, some of the banks over here are involved in this. So they're getting our money that we deposit every week or every month. But on the flip side of that money right there, the damn banks, the majority of our banks over here, they investing over there too and making billions on the side. So technically, they really don't even need some of the money that we have over here. This is some of the diamonds. So the diamond industry of South Africa brought in a revenue of 93 million pounds in 1962 to 2/3 of this was from gem diamonds, whose carat price was recently raised by the industry's controllers. Do you see that? A revenue of 93 million pounds in 1962. Google that. I mean, you can't make this up. But this right here taught me so much that I went to the museum and I looked up some of the quartz, some of the resources like diamonds and gems. It made me want to see them. And so, you know, in school, how you look at the periodic table? It's funny because that periodic table is kind of like a map to Africa's resources. So there, and Kwame Nkrumah is probably one that was fortunate enough to come to the United States and go to college. You probably had other Africans back during his time that were going to different places like Britain or Italy or, you know, America to get an education. But you didn't have a lot of people educated because you didn't have a lot of people in America that were educated. But you think during the 60s, even up to the early 1900s, when they first started digging, these people didn't know what they had. That was one of the major reasons they got exploited. And much to my chagrin, I pulled up a periodic table and just started looking at it myself. Like you got the titanium, magnesium, cobalt, nickel, all that right there is what these people over here and other countries were going into Africa getting. So I'm thinking myself, like, since Africa was a undeveloped nation that was under British control, a lot of the Africans probably never even thought to go out and see what was in their backyard. Just like over here in the United States, a lot of people, they live, they go places, but they don't explore. That periodic table there, if you pull up a periodic table and look at it, a lot of these minerals and stuff and chemical elements you see on here, Africa is full of them. Like they have a passable amount of them, and it's so much that they've been extracted for so many years and they still got a lot. Think about that. I just told you that some of the contracts did not expire to 2010 and 2011. That's how long they had mineral rights. And then go back to the chief who says, I didn't give them permission to do that. And then you got the Western countries who come over there and say, this is your thumbprint, isn't it, chief? We had our attorney right here who witnessed you say we had access to this. And so he couldn't do nothing because the Western nations would come in and probably wipe them out. But this periodic table here made me realize why a lot of people in America are poor. We go look for jobs like, Lockheed Martin or Halliburton. You go to Walmart, you go to Target, you go to Chevrolet. But you got a whole different group of people that take this periodic table. They find out what elements and resources are needed for this, and this. They go travel the world and they extract all these resources. That's what Africa has been a victim of. And what Dr. Kwame Nkrumah did in this book here in 1965, he exposed all this. And they say that's why they think there was Western influence on some of the assassination attempts, excuse me. But it's crazy. Because if you want to know who's been getting all Africa's resources, man, you got hundreds. I'm talking hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of the companies in here. And if you just read this book and see them, I mean, it's too many to name. Okay, the ICI was Imperial Chemical Industries. That's one of the main ones, Imperial Chemical Industries, the ICI. Union Carbide, Cortosina Vicosa, the AKU, BF Goodrich. So, it's so many. But yeah, man, this book it's a masterpiece, especially if you can take your mind and go back to 1965 when he wrote this. And you think about in the United States, 1965, we still having the civil rights movement over here. So during a time when we over here in the United States dealing with civil rights and other things, you got a group of people in Africa digging minerals and resources out of the ground that's coming in here making the equivalent of billions of dollars today. Man, that is crazy. Then the banks and everybody else is in on it. So when you talk about generational wealth, you think about the kids who inherited these companies like DuPont. You know, Rockefeller had his hand in there. It's crazy. So I understand why he wrote this. And I feel like everybody in Africa should be reading this, because this right here, this is the blueprint of everybody who's had their hand in Africa's backyard. And like I told you, some of these, a lot of these companies, the majority of them, they still exist today. As I was reading this, I Googled a lot of the companies. Like one company, it's in Utah. Still today, it's in Utah. It was started like in 1940 or 1950. It still exists today. And what does it do? The same thing it was started to do. So man, we got to start looking at that periodic table. The older I get, I realize how education is supposed to work. I mean, I remember looking at this periodic table. I remember looking at it in chemistry class. I remember talking about a lot of the elements, but nobody's going to tell you what to do with it. That's upon you. But apparently, all these companies in this book right here, hey, nobody told them. They went and found it. Yep, but I just wanted to share that with y'all. I mean, I know I said a mouthful. It's a great book, man, and I had to share it with you. So, Kwame Nkrumah, Neo-colonialism, the last stage of imperialism. If you like understanding how the world works, who's got all the money and how they got it, this book right here is for you. Trust me. It's not a long read either. You probably can finish reading this in about 2 weeks if you read like an hour a day. But this has been another great episode of Fourth Person Point of View, baby. I'm out.